Do you suffer from gas, Glock acquisition syndrome? If you do, there is no known cure, unfortunately, and I can only aid and abet in your addiction. Hey there, it's Range Ronin, and do you know what time it is? It is time for me to convince you that you need yet another Glock pistol. So, stay tuned, and let me tell you all about it. If you have tuned into my channel for any length of time, you know that I like the 1911. In fact, I carried one for most of my adult life. More so, you know that I like the 45 ACP cartridge. If you think 45 ACP, you would probably associate it with the 1911, and that would be a well-founded association, as it was designed for the 1911 by John Moses Browning in 1904 for use in his Colt semi-automatic pistol, and was accepted by the military as standard fodder for the M1911 and its variants like the Combat Commander and Officer's Model. Some folks have a propensity to associate different calibers with different pistols. At least I do. For example, I equate the 9mm with the Beretta 92 M9, the 38 Special 357 Magnum with any Smith & Wesson revolver that chambers it, the 44 Magnum with the Smith & Wesson Model 29, 380 Auto with a Walther, and so on. To some, it would be a travesty to shoot 45 ACP and something other but a 1911. But due to the cartridge's popularity, many pistols and some pistol caliber carbines have been chambered for the 45 ACP. And who does not know about the Tommy gun, Chicago typewriter, Chicago piano, trench sweeper, or trench broom, the Thompson M1928A1 submachine gun? I must admit to shooting and carrying pistols that chamber the 45 ACP other than the 1911-based pistol. Springfield Armory XD was my first non-1911 handgun, and later an XDM and XDS. At some point, I discovered Glock pistols and rejected them, at first. Then, I began developing an appreciation of what these polymer pistols were capable of and what they had to offer. Now, I have several in various calibers. My first Glock in 45 ACP was the Glock G21. While I enjoyed shooting it, I never had it in my mind to carry one. That changed when I acquired a G41 with a slimmer slide width than the G21, but obviously longer barrel and slide, and just as long in the grip department. On the opposite end of the scale came the G36, a subcompact version with a 6+1 cartridge capacity. I actually carried this little guy for a while. Then I discovered the G30SF. The slide, although the G30 was termed as a subcompact by Glock, was just as wide as the G21, but did offer more capacity than the G36. The G30SF, however, was eventually sold. Then came the G30S, a pistol that could still house 10+1 like the G30 and G30SF, but had a slide width like that of the G36 and G41. It also has a wider grip than the G36, but shorter than the G21 and G41. With the G36, I needed to add a grip sleeve to get a better grip surface and a tad thicker grip. With the G30S, I don't. When it came down to this year's rotation selection, the Glock G30S went high on the list, although I do like the G45, the pistol with a G19 length slide on a G17 frame, and 17 rounds of 9mm, just waiting for me to call on them. But I still favor the 45 ACP cartridge over the 9mm for my own peace of mind. I do like the 40 Smith & Wesson and also the 10mm because they are fine cartridges. 45 ACP for me, however, and like in The Godfather, just pulls you back in when you try to get out. The Glock G30S is getting prepped for carry. There have been plenty of reviews, written and videoed on this pistol, but if you stay with me, I'll give you my take, and you will learn all about it. And I'll compare the G30S to the G36 at times. The Glock G30S can be compared to plenty of other Glock pistols, including the entire clan of 45 AC pistols that it belongs to. With the G30, Glock's goal was to produce a subcompact pistol to the G21 and G41. With the G30S, Glock's goal was to create a subcompact pistol in 45 ACP with a thinner profile and a lighter carry weight than the G30, yet maintain the same capacity as the G30 of 10+1 rounds, but which competes with the 6+1 round G36 for user selection. The 3.78-inch barrel, with its very wide opening at the muzzle, is the same as the G30, but with a thinner slide, and yes, the barrel is polygonal rifled and is somewhat thinner in wall thickness to the G30. An accessory rail with a 1-point mount adorns the bottom of the frame, which is a common sight to see these days. It does tempt me, at times, to mount a good laser on the front of this little beast. And speaking of sights, the sights are box stock Glock polymer, but the sights can be changed to something more desirable. Although I have never had an issue with stock Glock sights, I did opt for the XS Sights 3-dot tritium night sights that I favor just a bit more. Looking at the left side of the G30S, nothing looks out of place, including the slide markings. On the right side, there is a nicely formed hole in the slide for expended shells to come out, and which does its job well. Just below that, you will find the serial number in its usual place on the slide, and also on the bottom front of the frame. Just behind the ejection port is the external extractor. It does an excellent job of pulling spent cases from the chamber. The slide width is slimmer than the G21 and G30, but is the same as the G36 and G41 at 1.0 inch. Beveling at the top and front removes some of the blocky Glock look to it. Peering down the sights reveals that the slide is really not all that blocky, and is on par with most pistol slide widths on the market. The trigger housing is typical Glock, with its contoured front with front serrations, undercutting at the rear, and enough airspace to house a gloved hand. The trigger is ridged and rounded like all Glocks, and incorporates the standard Glock trigger safety lever that must be pressed for the trigger to slide into the frame. The trigger still provides that all familiar free play and heavy sponge and release feel that has caused many of us to develop a love-hate relationship with Glock triggers. Of course, The Glock safety system is evident in the G30S. This specimen has a 3-pound, 4.36-ounce trigger pull weight with a 5-pull average. Both complain about the Glock triggers, but for myself, I find the trigger operation and pull weight just about right for a stressful situation. This one has a trigger pull weight that is less than some 1911 pistols, but with a different feel. The grip width is as thick as its bigger brothers, the G21 and G41, which means that it feels small to me. The grip is devoid of adapters that can somewhat tailor your hand to the grip, at least with trigger reach. 2 finger grooves adorn the front of the grip, and those, as with the stock lock sights, are a thorn of contention for some. For me, they are spaced about right for my fingers. If equipped with a 9-round magazine with the flush base plate, grip length can be somewhat lacking in real estate. With a 10-round magazine, however, there is enough real estate for my little finger to rest against. However, I have exchanged the base plates on 2 of my magazines with GVN grip extensions for evaluation that have a bit of a lip on them that helps me hook the grip when drawing from a holster, and also can assist in snatching a magazine from the magwell, if need be. 2 other magazines remain equipped with the standard base plates. The results of my evaluation will determine which will be the chosen one. The grip texture is that of the Gen 3 Glocks, and the rear and front of the grip is highly textured, which affords a pretty good gripping surface for my hand to press against. The sides of the grips, however, I still find slippery in nature. Some Talon rubberized grip tape may find its way onto the grip. I don't want to increase the grip girth, just give it more substance. In my fantasy, I see a treatment somewhat to the G30S as was done with the G45. Keep the slide length and put a G21 frame under it, giving it more capacity, but in doing so would take away from the concealment factor. So, I'll let my fantasy fly away like a bird on a wing. On the left side of the frame, the slide stop also does its job well to lock back the slide on an empty magazine. Like most Glide slide stops, the button is small and lacking in real estate for the thumb to have any real control over it to release the slide, should it be used as such. Fortunately, there are enough serrations at the rear of the slide to accommodate moving the slide to the rear for chambering or locking the slide back. With that said, Captivated recoil spring guide rod assembly has a substantial spring rate, enough to warrant some gripping strength when attempting to move the slide. No front slide serrations are provided. The disassembly magazine is its usual small self that I find contentious at times to manipulate, and yes, the G30S, like the G36, has the leaf spring for the takedown assembly, rather than the newer coil spring. Last but not least is the magazine and magazine catch and release button. The Gen 3 era magazine button is a small rectangular and serrated affair, and like the G36, it cannot be swapped to the right side. The magazines are the usual Glock polymer wrap metal units that are clearly marked for 45 ACP ammunition, and that, when loaded, can be seen through witness holes. Regardless if you happen to have a 9-round magazine or a 10-round magazine, that last round can be contentious to top off the magazine. The magazines in this specimen fit more loosely than I am accustomed to with Glock pistols. While the magazines for my G21 and G41 do have some play in them, magazines for the G30S have quite a bit more play, to the point of rattling a bit when locked into place. Does it affect performance? We'll see during the range segment. The last item on my hit list is the lack of grip adapter, as found on the G21 and G41 Gen 4 models. The trigger reach on the G30SF, G21, G41, and G30S is identical at 2.85 inches, as compared to 2.95 inches of the G36. Go figure. While I am the one that will install the largest grip adapter on any Glock that has them, I find the trigger reach of the G30S just fine, and I can live with it. Unless I can't. The appearance of the G30S is like that of any Glock, all business. But you can take pleasure in shooting the G30S, and I think that is where we need to go from here. So, let's do that. Having put a few rounds downrange from Glock pistols in the past, I somewhat knew what to expect from the G30S. But one never really knows what to expect when bringing a new pistol to the range for the first time. The G30S is being prepped as a carry piece that I suspect, and if the G30S performs to my expectations, will be an all-season, all-reason carry piece. Federal 230 grain FMJ was the fodder for today for a general range evaluation. Also on hand was some Federal 230 grain high shock jacketed hollow point ammunition, rated at 850 feet per second, that I really wanted to evaluate. So let's get going and see how the G30S and I can work together. It has become somewhat of a habit for me to have a synopsis of the range day, a summary of performance, and my thoughts, if you will. The G30S, like the G36, can be a snappy little critter. A lot has to do with its barrel and grip length. For comparison's sake, the G30S and G36 are about on par with each other, with the major difference being round count. The G30S does have an advantage over the G36 in that department. Some might say that the G30S weighs more when loaded over the G36. I will agree. However, when weighed with an empty magazine, 0.3 ounces of weight difference will not even be felt. And when you shoot the first 4 rounds out of the G30S, the weight of the pistol is about the weight of the G36 with its 6-round magazine. This weight difference isn't even worth discussing. The feel in the hand of both the G30S and G36 is nearly identical, but the grip glove that I installed on the G36 fills the hand more positively than the grip of the G30S, and has a grippier feel to it. Because of that, I may opt for a Pachmayr grip glove for the G30S. The minor bit of added grip girth will not bother me, as the grip girth on both pistols are not that much different when concealed. Maintenance of the Glock G30S is as straightforward as with any Glock pistol, with regard to safety checks, disassembly, inspection, lubrication, assembly, and function checks. Glock maintenance is well documented, and I am not going to take up your time by presenting the full maintenance here. I will, however, invite you to dive into the user manual for complete maintenance instructions, and visit the Glock download site for acquiring PDF copies of an inspection list used by Glock armorers, preventive maintenance instructions, and more, including a Glock warranty form, information regarding Glock adjustable sights, MOS plate instructions, and part ordering information for both Glock armorers and non-armorers. So, let's move on to carrying and concealing the Glock G30S. Like the Glock G36, and being of a subcompact nature, the Glock G30S lends itself pretty well to concealed carry. Some may say that the G30S is a chunky little critter, but let's put that into perspective, shall we? The overall width of the G30S is wider than the G36, and slightly greater than the officer-style 1911 and 45 ACP caliber, which is 1.30 inches, as compared to the 1.38 inches of the G30S. But aren't we talking about only 0.08 inch difference, with the width advantage going to an officer-style 1911? The overall width of the G30S is wider than the G36, and slightly greater than the officer-style 1911 and 45 ACP caliber, which is about 1.30 inches, as compared to 1.38 inches of the G30S. But we are talking about only a 0.08 inch difference, with the width advantage going to an officer-style 1911. The height of the G30S at 4.80 inches is shorter than that of the officer-style's 1911, 5 inches, although the magazine capacity is 10 rounds, versus the original capacity of the Colt Officer Model 1911, that was 6 rounds, and even with 7 rounds being offered in most modern officer-style 1911s. The barrel length of 3.78 inches is longer than the original officer's model 1911 of 3.25 inches, although shorter and longer barrel lengths of officer model 1911s can be found today. For example, the barrel length of the Ruger officer-style 1911 is 3.60 inches, and the barrel length of the Rock Island Armory CS is 3.62 inches. Both the Glock G30S and G36 have an advantage, but not a huge advantage, in the barrel length department. The unloaded weight of the G30S is much less at 22.75 ounces with an empty magazine as compared to the 31 ounces of weight with the officer model 1911. With that said, there are as many similarities as there are differences between the Glock G30S and a 1911 of comparable size. My carry means for the G30S consist of a Gelco King Tuck holster that also works well with the G36 and G30, and other pistols of comparable size. There is also the Alien Gear Cloak Tuck 3.5 for the Glock G21, G22, G20, and G30 that works well with the G30S and G36, and which I can quickly set up for strong side or cross-draw carry. Finally, there is the Gelco Classic Light 2.0 shoulder system for autos that has become my favorite for shoulder carry. I have been carrying the G30S and G36 in this holster for a short while, and it is a most pleasing carry, whether I am sitting, pounding out these reviews, or in my vehicle and while standing or walking. The holster is versatile, as it also works with other Glock pistols, as well as some non-Glock pistols. These holsters are my choices, and your preferences may differ, which is just fine with me. You should carry in a holster and method that works for you. Just carry in a safe manner. Okie dokie, let's move on to my final impressions of the Glock G30S. Sure, you can walk, but maybe you prefer to stroll. You could peregrinate, wander from place to place, and you could also amble, ramble, saunter, meander, jaunt, tour, march, traipse, tramp, shuffle, trudge, hike, locomote, or hoof it. If you specifically want to walk at night, well, that's noctambulation. Regardless of your means of moving yourself from one place to another at any time, you need to do so with the peace of mind that a well-trained with concealed carry firearm can provide, along with situational awareness, and not going to stupid places to do stupid things with stupid people. The Glock G30S is one such firearm that can help you with the former, but not the latter. Subcompact in size, relatively light in weight, even when fully loaded with your favorite 45 ACP ammunition, the Glock G30S is something that you can wrap your hands and head around, knowing that it will be highly reliable when it needs to be, in your moment of need. The weight, with loaded magazine of 30.16 ounces, is on par with that of a 1911 officer's model, but you get an additional 4 rounds in the magazine, as compared to 6 rounds of the officer's model 1911, and incidentally, also with the G36. With 10 plus rounds of the vulnerable 45 ACP on hand, plus whatever spare magazines you decide to carry, the G30S's capacity is greater than most 1911 pistols, with the exception of double-stack units. Granted that there are 45 ACP pistols with greater capacities, such as the G21 and G41. There is also the XDM Elite 3.8 compact OSP handgun that, with a magazine change, can house 13 rounds, but like the G21 and G41, give up concealability with an extended grip length and or larger size in general. The G30S can use magazines from the G21 and G41 that will extend the capacity to 13 rounds, just as does the Springfield Armory XDM Elite 3.8 Compact OSP. But for concealability purposes, these would be relegated to spare magazine status in my carry playground. Is the Glock G30S the end-all, say-all personal protection pistol? Of course not, but it will fill the role of a personal defense assistant when called upon to do so, and do so quite well. Thank you. In my humble opinion, the Glock G30S could fulfill the role of an all-season, all-reason carry firearm. Well, my friends, here we are again, the end of another chapter in these chronicles of mine. Thank you for staying with me, and I hope that you will return for more of my gun and gear reviews. Until it comes time for us to gather together again, take care, stay vigilant, stay armed, and stay safe out there.